Everybody. Sorry for the slight delay. We had a little technical difficulties, which probably some of you noticed as well. I'd like to call to order the ADR meeting of Tuesday, May 18th. I am the current chair of the ADR, Mark Kruchnet. The other ADR members can introduce themselves, and then I'll describe what we're going to do, and we'll move on.
Hey everybody, Mark Fritz, ADR member.
Hi,
Julie, you're on mute.
Laura Dewar, ADR member.
I'm Stephen Sutro.
Joey Buckingham, off mute, ADR member.
Great. And before we get on to business, I'll just let those of you who haven't attended one of these sort of know the process. What happens is as we bring up each item, the town presents it, then the owners and or their project team can do a further presentation, and the ADR members might ask questions, any clarifications. We then open it up to the public. If there are any neighbors or non-neighbors who are interested in a project or concerned, we'll then have time to talk about the project. And after that is all done, we'll bring it back to the ADR for our recommendations, which are then forwarded to the town council. The first order of business we have tonight is the approval of the minutes from the April 20th meeting. I read through those minutes and I'm fine with them. Did anyone else in the ADR or everyone else read through those? Does someone want to second that approval?
Second.
Okay, great. So those meetings, the minutes of the meeting are approved. We now have open time for public comments. If anybody listening or zooming on the meeting wants to discuss anything that is not on tonight's agenda, you have up to 3 minutes to discuss that. I do not see anyone raising their hand, so we can move on. And the first order of business is the Millman residence at 7 Upper Ames Avenue. Oh, and I'm sorry, Patrick, before we get into this project, I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this in a meeting. I certainly have meant to several times, and I always forget at the end of the meetings. It would be great when we have a really small project and a really large project to put the really small project first, because sometimes they're just like 5 to 15 minutes, and that way they wouldn't have to wait around while we dealt with maybe a larger project.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we can put that thought into the meetings when we're setting up the agendas.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Okay, would the Millmans or their, first we'll let the town present the project, and then we'll have the Millmans and or their design team do a further presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair and ADR group members, Planner Matthew Weintraub. Patrick, can I have the ability to share my screen? And I'll have a presentation that I'll present while I briefly introduce the project. Great. So the project before you is the Millman residence at 7 Upper Ames Avenue. Project owners are Michael and Emily Millman, and the project designer is Brandy Dubs with Geisler Architects. The project is located on the south side of Upper Ames Avenue, on the west side of Shady Lane, as shown here on the location map. And some property characteristics. It's a pretty standard lot, 1 acre size in a 1 acre district, virtually no slope. It does have existing non-conforming floor area and building coverage, as well as a non-conforming side yard setback in this location. Property history, assessor indicates that development occurred in 1953 and 1990. Town's records indicate variances in 1994 and I believe that's should be 1999. I apologize for that, for variances in design review for residential additions. So the existing project site contains the single family residence, which occupies most of this side of the property, as well as an attached garage in this location, the front of the property being here on the right side, and a detached pool house at the back of the property. And there's also an existing pool. And the proposed project would remove the pool house and construct a new pool bath, essentially. It would also convert the existing 2-car garage in this location to an internal attached ADU, accessory dwelling unit. It would also construct a new wing onto the building, which would include a 1-story 2-car garage to replace the garage that would be converted to the ADU, as well as a 2nd story that would contain essentially a guest suite that would not qualify as its own dwelling unit, essentially. It would also involve substantial facade renovation at the front of the facade. This is a little blurry, but this is the image that was provided in the plans, the renderings, and I've just blown it up a little so you can see the proposed change from the existing facade to the new facade. These components here would remain as 1 story with essentially high ceilings. This component here would be the only true 2-story component of the project. And this would be the new garage with guest suite above. And this location would be the location of the attached accessory dwelling unit, which would be essentially internal to that residence. The project also includes substantial landscape revegetation, new lighting, and new fencing. There is not yet an approved vegetation management plan for the property, so the proposed landscaping could change in response to fire department requirements through this process. So this is not necessarily the final landscape plan. So one can imagine that perhaps closer to the buildings and within 10 feet of the roadway, there might be less plantings than what is shown here. And those plantings might be made up elsewhere on the property. No public comments have been received on this project. And in summary, staff requests that the ADR group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town council regarding the merits of the project, consistent with the design review criteria and standards of the Ross Municipal Code section 18.41.100. That concludes my presentation. The architect, I believe, is online and may also be able to provide some information or presentation. And I do have the plan set available for review if you have any questions. Thank you. And once again, the architect is Randy Dubs with Geisler Architects.
Hi, sorry. I think I'll let Steve Geisler, he can lead this. He's actually the head architect here, who is muted. Steve, can you go ahead? You're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Hi, Steve Geisler here, Geisler Architects. Brandy and I had the pleasure of working on this project with Mike and Emily Millman, the new owners. I think Mike's on, so I thought he might want to do a quick introduction of why they purchased the property and what their goals were for the renovation. Are you there, Mike?
I am. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
You're muted too, Mike.
Yes. No, we can hear you fine.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. So there's Emily.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Mike.
Hi.
Great to meet everyone. And thank you for having us on Zoom this evening. So just a little context, why we moved to Ross. Many years ago, when we first started dating, we were very humbled and fortunate to have come up to Phoenix Lake and just fell in love with Ross. It's just such a spectacular town. This is obviously before we had children and didn't yet visualize the family dynamic. And so we spent the first part of our lives together in the city, which was wonderful. But then as we grew the family, and now we've got a 6-year-old boy named Lucas, a 4-year-old daughter named Isabel, and a 2-year-old named Emma, we decided it was time to come up and live in a beautiful town. And the only place we could see ourselves living was Ross. And so we had come from the East Coast. We had fallen in love with kind of the Ross shingle style homes. And it's just a fantastic town in so many levels. We've had the fortunate chance to meet some of our neighbors, and we have friends up here, and it's just such an incredible place. And so we found this home on 7 Upper Ames. Tom, the owner, was fantastic and shared his passion for the property and the town, and was very kind in how he transitioned the home over to us. And we want to now transition the home to modernize it and make it kind of a blend of the East Coast style we were accustomed to bringing up, and now the West Coast and Ross and the shingle style homes. So we asked Steve and Brandy to modernize the home and make sure it kind of fits into the spirit and love that you all have built around Ross. And with that, just a little context around the renovation itself. We have a live-in au pair who we adore as part of our family. To ease the commute from back and forth in the city, we thought it made sense to have an au pair unit so that she can spend her time with the family. And that's the ADU context for you all. And with that, maybe I'll turn the microphone, if there are not any questions, back to Steve.
Great, thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, we were tasked with bringing this home up to sort of modern standards. Besides, I'm sure you all were out there and saw that it's under major construction right now. What they're doing currently is redoing all the systems. It had a 1950s electrical heating, minimal air conditioning, plumbing issues. So that's all being taken care of now under a separate permit. And the idea really was to work on, as Mike said, creating a more Ross style home. This house's main feature as you approach it is both driveway and garage. The front door is off in a corner currently, so we moved the front door to the center. We wanted to create very much a welcoming porch and a nice entry sequence that takes you from the roadway through vegetation to the front porch. In addition to that change in the front, we wanted to really create a little bit more volume in the roof as a typical shingle style building would have. The house directly next door to this house has a much steeper pitch roof. It's more of a classic shingle style, although a 1-story building, a much more steep pitch roof with lots of detail around gables and panels. So we've done the same. We've increased the volume. We're allowing those upper gable windows to flood the center of the house with light. We've moved the shingles from a gray color to a more natural brown to blend in. The roofing material is a sort of a dark slatey gray. It will be a composition roof. So all meant to blend with the environment rather than stick out from the environment. A big part of our program was really moving that garage. It's so prominent now, and the driveway is so prominent. So we're sort of blessed with the fact that the street rises up there, and we were able to tuck the new garage around the corner in an existing flat area. So we have to do very minimal grading in there. It's going to allow us to create an auto court to get the cars, the parking, the turnaround off of that front of the house and really hide the garage doors. Hopefully you saw that when you were out there with the story poles. There is, as Mike mentioned, a fair amount of redesign, or Matthew did, on the site. Really, one of the goals there was to create a more family, kid-friendly play area. The swimming pool, unfortunately, is not doing well. It's got cracks and is leaking, and so it has to be redone. So with the help of the landscape architect, it was decided to move it slightly to a better position. We did want to get rid of that pool house. It obstructs views throughout the whole property. It limits them to just where the pool is, and we wanted to be able to take a more panoramic view from the house. We've also increased a couple of entertaining areas right next to the house so that the family has areas to gather, specifically directly off the family room and kitchen, for barbecuing activities, outdoor dining, things like that. So that's really what we focused on. Mike mentioned about the ADU. That was very important to try to cut down on driving, as we all know. That's a goal of all the communities here. And so we were able to take that garage and have it be a better use. So really with that, I'll happy to answer any questions, very nitty gritty specifics. Brandy knows a lot of that, but we're happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Steve. Does any ADR member have any questions of either the town or the Millman design team?
I do. I would actually like the applicants, the architects to walk through the numbers very carefully for us regarding existing, proposed, and allowed FAR. I was a little unclear on that from the way the charts were set up. Just where you fall in the ADR, or pardon me, in the FAR calculations. You basically got rid of the pool house and you're applying that FAR to the added square footage in the front. If you could just quickly review those numbers for me, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Do you want Matthew maybe to bring up that chart, or do you just want to
Yes,
go?
that'd
Okay.
be great. That'd be great.
Brandy, do you want to maybe run?
I was wondering if maybe we could go to sheet, I think it's 1.2, so we can see the graphic along with it.
What I was looking for was allowed. There's existing and proposed, but I was looking for an allowed square footage.
That we didn't include on this chart, just because it's it's a built structure.
So I can answer that the allowed square footage or FAR is 15% in the district. The property has existing non-conforming floor area that they're working with and that they're proposing to retain. There's some fluidity in the FAR numbers currently with respect to, in particular, there are what qualify as covered porch areas. And I'm still working with the applicant to determine exactly how those covered porch area allowances translate over to new floor area for the addition. And so there's still some fluidity there. There's a possibility that in order to liberate enough floor area for the new addition, there may result in less covered porch area at the back of the property, essentially. That's just looking forward in terms of actually clarifying what those FAR numbers would be. So I can provide just that information up front for this discussion.
Okay, because usually we have 3 columns.
Oh, sorry. Matthew, I'm sorry to interrupt. It might be helpful to Joey if you could pull up page 2 of your staff report on your computer and share it. I believe that's the page that Joey's referencing.
Yes.
It's the project data, which is the top half of or really the whole page 2 of your staff report.
Sure, just give me a moment.
Is that what you were talking about, Joey?
Yeah, I'm just a little unclear on where the FAR is coming from to add so much. It's coming from the pool house.
Covered porches.
Yeah, it's actually from 3 areas, just broadly, as Matthew pulls that up. It's coming from the pool house, which is being demolished. It's coming from the conversion of an ADU and cutting back some very large porches to have them reduce the floor area as well. So we have those balanced out so that the reduction actually equals very closely the change. So there is no net change in it. And as Matthew mentioned, as we read the code, anything over a 10-foot overhang counts, and we understand that there might be some reinterpretation of that by the city council, and I think that's why there's maybe a little confusion. But as we did the changes, we removed those areas to match, and we designed the new areas, specifically the garage and the guest suites above, to match that square footage exactly.
Okay. Okay, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you.
And if I could just add a little bit more information, we don't believe that our definition or how we consider front porches is really changed in any way. It's more of how does an existing front porch get converted to enclosed floor area, which is allowed under the code. It appears that some additional covered porch area may have to be removed in order to liberate the floor area necessary for the addition. So these numbers here, the 16.3% FAR that's existing, would not change in the final project. What might change is the amount of covered porch area at the back of the property is how that might result.
And I will say that as we've been working with Matthew, we're completely open to doing any necessary reduction on those porches to have it conform to the city standards.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Does anyone have any other questions regarding the design or the appearance, anything? No? Okay. I will then open it up to the public. If there's anyone else not associated with the project who would like to discuss it or comment on it. I do not see any hands up. Okay, so now I will bring it back to the ADR for our recommendations to the town council. Would someone like to go first? Mark, you look like you're smiling.
Smiling because we do this every time. We should have a alphabetical order or something. Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I don't have a lot of comments on this particular project. I think my initial reaction around the increased volume of that, of the one-story portion of your building, I was a little confused because it does appear as if it's going to be a second story, and I couldn't figure out where all that floor area was coming. But I appreciate its effort in balancing out the project. So increasing that mass while, yeah, it makes a larger street frontage, I think is appropriate to balance out the mass that you're adding over the garage. So the project does seem to balance fairly well. So I think that's a pretty good move. I guess I didn't ask one question. The pool house is more or less demolished, right? Is there just like a stub of a pool house left?
Yeah, all that's left really is just a bathroom.
It's like a storage thing. I mean, but even in person, when I went out there, it's not really there anymore, is it?
Yeah, I didn't see a pool house.
No, it's still there.
Currently it's pool equipment is what it is.
Yeah, they just removed it, Steve and Brandy, this week. So it's gone, except for they have a little portion for their supplies for the construction team.
Okay, I was confused.
I was
couldn't
surprised
map
tonight as well.
out.
It's gone.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't there. Okay, that little stub was all that was left. Okay, that makes a little sense. Yeah, I think the materials are appropriate. The proportions seem pretty good. So I really don't have a lot of comments on this particular project. I'm happy to pass it to another member.
Thanks, Mark. I'll go. First of all, I think it's going to be a huge improvement over what's there now. That might be a much lower bar than you're aiming for, but I think it'll be a nice improvement. I'm also okay with the massing. I had a couple comments that I'd actually like some of the architects on the ADR just to give their opinion on. And one was the columns next to the front door. It looks like they're round white columns. Is that correct, Steve?
No, they're actually square.
Oh, they're square. Okay, so I saw that wrong.
And
I'd
we
just like
had
to get
shown
the
some
architect's
landscape
opinion on-
columns.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not the landscape columns. It looked like there were columns to each side of the front door, white columns, maybe 8 or 9 feet tall.
Yes,
maybe,
You want to bring up the front elevation maybe? Yeah, so we could take a look at that at the same time.
or are those not columns? Is that just the white paint of the walls behind something else, behind something that's gray?
no, Mark, those are square white columns, and you can see barely on the rendering, there's some pilasters to either side. So it's a half column with a full column, and they'll sit on a little shingle cheek wall. So they'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 feet in height when they sit on the cheek wall. And we're using the cheek wall to capture the stairs that lead up to the front porch.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to tell from this vantage point. And then the only comment, I had a couple comments in the yard, and this is just something to think about in my impression. One was the pool. I noticed you had the steps on the side away from the house, which just as a pool user, usually you would want the steps and maybe even the hot tub as well on the side towards the house where you're exiting the house. So you don't have to walk around to use the steps. Might be something to think about.
Okay.
And then if, and this is just, my 2 cents. If I was redesigning this house and adding a second story at some place, I might also think about taking away the portion of the house where it angles that's furthest from the road, and maybe adding that square footage as a second story somewhere else, just for more yard space.
We actually, thank you. We did look at that. And when we were looking at it, there were some cost issues associated with that because that square footage was already there. And so to really demolish the whole front of the house and back, we had our structural engineer even look at it, and it became pretty onerous with shear walls, new footings, all sorts of things like that.
Okay, and that's not a design comment for approval purposes. That was just for how I would rather have a bigger yard than a smaller yard.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Okay, those were my only comments. Thank you. Joey, Stephen, Laura?
I'm happy to go.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go. I can support the project completely as submitted, and I think it's very well done. I'd love to see copper gutters. I'd love to see deeply set windows. There are a few little details that I don't see that are illustrated yet that I know are coming. But I think that the form is lovely and the volume is lovely, and I think it's totally supportable.
Thanks, Stephen. Joey, Laura?
Laura?
Laura, you're on mute still.
Sorry, thank you. I just have a question. Is the addition in the setbacks at all? I don't remember from the drawings.
No.
No. Okay. Yeah, I think that at first it's when I arrived at the site and saw the volume, it seemed like a kind of large mass right at the street. But with the way that the street slopes up and it kind of tucks in a little bit, I think that helps in the situation. I overall really appreciate the architecture. I think it's a great improvement. And one of the things I thought was, I was just blown away by the vegetation in the backyard. It was pretty amazing. So I don't know what amount of that is being retained for this project, but I just thought that was really special. One question, is there like a covered shade structure somewhere on the site?
There's 2 covered shade areas. One is directly off of the family room kitchen area, and the other one, it's sort of an L shape, and it attaches to one that is directly off of the living room.
I'm just trying to think if I had any other comments. My only other, and this is just because I'm a little bit newer to this process as well. With the ADU, is it, and maybe the things have changed, is it supposed to be connected to the house like that? I understand the intent for the au pair to use it. I'm just not sure, maybe Matthew or Patrick can respond to that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The code does allow for attached accessory dwelling units, provided that they do have their own separate dedicated entrance. So an ADU can be either detached or attached. It's either way.
Okay, got it. Okay. And then, yeah, I just didn't know if there was any like protocol around transferring the square footage from the existing garage to just create that as the ADU. I am not familiar with it, so.
Yeah, I can briefly kind of explain how that works. So the existing garage is allowed to be converted to an ADU ministerially. In other words, that ADU conversion is allowed by right. The owner has also requested, which is allowed under the code, an ADU exception to transfer the amount of square footage converted to an ADU to the main dwelling as an allowance for a new addition. And the code does allow for that exception to be requested and to be made. And that particular exception is not linked to a low income rental requirement as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those were my only comments.
Thanks, Laura. Joy?
Well, first of all, welcome to town. This is an exciting project. I look forward to meeting you both. A lot of my comments were probably, comments that were knee-jerk reactions from before these ADUs were so much encouraged that they're just basically, there's a lot of things we used to say that don't even matter anymore because they're encouraged so explicitly. But I will say it for the record, I think it's a lovely project, but it used to be where we didn't want the ADUs in the home. We wanted it a clear separation, so above the garage. And I was kind of wondering why you guys didn't just put the ADU above the garage instead of this kind of ADU in the house that they're just going to blow down the wall and use it as a part of the house. But it doesn't matter anymore. And you took generally all the square footage that was in the back of the lot came to the front of the lot in this addition. You've done a very nice job integrating that, and it's definitely your right to do it. So it's lovely, and I wish you luck.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So Matthew, Patrick, I believe you have a unanimous recommendation from the ADR going forward to the town council. And also welcome to town to the Millmans.
Yeah, welcome.
And congratulations. And I hope you've already purchased your wood for your construction project.
Yeah, it's not insignificant.
Mark.
Yeah, it's going up.
Well, thank you all for your time and the focus. We're excited.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Welcome.
Bye.
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 Okay, so now we will move on to the next project, which is the 187 Prospect Avenue. And Matthew, would you like to present it?
Yes, thank you, Chair and ADR group members. The item before you is the Stewart residence at 187 Prospect Avenue. The owners are Ashley and Andy Stewart, and the project designer is Scott Sikaris. I hope I got that correct.
That's fine.
With Denler Hobart Gardens. So the property is located here on the east side of Prospect Avenue, on the east side of town, east of Sir Francis Drake. And the property characteristics include a lot that's about twice the size of the minimum lot standard for the district. It does have a substantial slope, although it's not considered a hillside lot. It does have 17% average slope. And it does, other characteristics include the dense mature tree plantings around this, around the south side of the lot, as well as an open south yard area in this location. And that's this south portion of the property is the location of the project. Property history, according to the assessor, major development occurred in 1918 and 1985, and variants were issued in 1965 and 1989 for residential additions related to setbacks and floor area. The existing project site includes a single family residence and a detached garage. And in this configuration, Prospect Avenue is now to the bottom of the screen, so that the front of the property is now at the bottom. And we see that the right half of the property is more or less open and available for some development potential. We would also note that topography plays a role here. The property slopes from the back down to the front. There is this area roughly here that I hope people can see I'm circling with my cursor. This is a relatively flat portion of the lawn that would be used for the new pool. And these existing walls that create a terraced effect would be reconfigured to some extent to maximize the use of that existing flat area without ideally resulting in major land changes to the front of the property. So that's part of the project strategy. And here we see the proposed project itself. We can see that it proposes to construct a new pool in that sort of larger, flatter zone in the middle of the yard. It also includes a new patio and arbor structure that would be located behind the pool. And this would be located in the rear yard setback. Its location is somewhat determined by the best available place for the pool, as well as a preferred location for a patio, which would otherwise be perhaps at the front of the property, which would not be the ideal design. So in speaking with the designer, that's part of the reasoning for locating this in the rear setback area. The project also includes a new front yard fence along the front of the property here and connecting to the house. And the new pool equipment enclosure would be located near the front of the property with complying setbacks and with shielding and screening for noise and for visual aesthetics. Here are some of the project details, just showing a sort of simple wood arbor structure and some of the fence details and lighting details, fairly standard. Public comments have been received from all the adjacent owners who, with the exception, no comment has been received from this owner at 27, not even sure what street that is, but the address of 27. However, there have been positive comments of support received from all the other surrounding adjacent owners, including 185 to the north, 2 Fallen Leaf to the east, 193 Prospect to the south, and 186 Prospect to the west. Oops. And so to conclude my presentation, staff requests that the ADR group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town council regarding the merits of the project consistent with the design review ordinance contained in the code. That completes my presentation, and I'm available to answer questions or display the plans if needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew.
Does someone from the Stewart design team want to do a further presentation of anything?
Andy and Ashley, would you like to say something?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Nice to meet you. Sorry, we're trying to get some sunlight here on the Zoom. Just a little background, Ash and I are both native Californians, but spent the last 20 years or so on the East Coast. Been looking for a house in Ross for a couple of years now, and found something at 187 Prospect we really loved. Old bones, beautiful old house that we really want to, respect the history and beauty of it, but modernize a little bit. So spent a lot of time with Scott and spoke with the neighbors about how we could put in a pool, clean up the yard in a way that really sort of brings that section of the house to life. So really excited about the project and looking forward to hearing anybody's thoughts or comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Sekaris. I'm with Denler Hobart Gardens. Hopefully everyone made an effort to get out to the site. The story poles for the trellis, I think, tell a story. When you enter the property, you come off of Prospect on a walkway and you go around to the side of the house, the south side of the house, to ascend the main stairs to the covered porch that is the entry of the house. So it's unusual in that you cross into the side yard and then up the stairs to the front door. I think that's important for the development of the landscape on this south side yard, in that we wanted to not compete with that 3-story facade of this historic structure. And looking to that, what we wanted to do is we wanted to place the pool in an area that was in the best site for a pool when it comes to sun and openness, as well as proximity to the kitchen area, which is in the southeast corner of the building, so that there can be visual connection between the most used room in the house and the pool, just for safety. And then looking at the desire to have a trellis, a covered structure to get out of the sun for those that are sun sensitive, we placed that trellis on the uphill side of the pool. We looked at placing it in other locations, but we didn't, like I said, didn't want to compete with the main structure, the beauty of that historic house. And so we did place it to the east of the pool, set into the hillside, with the back side of the trellis being set on the retaining wall itself to mitigate the height of that, the feeling of that structure. We think it turned out well. I would love to hear your opinions of that. It does encroach in the rear yard setback, not to a great extent, but it does. And I think that is the crux of the conversation. If all of you feel that it is the best solution for a pool area, that would be appreciated. And we'd love to hear that when hopefully we go to town council. If you have any questions or you want me to walk through the plan, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Scott, could you tell me, between the street and the pool, there's, is it a retaining wall? Is there one with the bushes and then the straight one? Is there a curved one with the bushes on it? Or how many retaining walls and how tall are they between the street and the pool?
Good question. What we wanted to do is we wanted to, instead of one large retaining wall, we wanted to mitigate that. So we created two, they're parallel, but they're curved retaining wall. The upper retaining wall will be 30 inches above the grade of the space in between the two walls. And then the lower wall will vary in its height, anything from 1 foot up to 4.5 feet at its tallest.
Oh, I see where it is. Okay, now I understand. Thank you. And you have drawn on the landscape plan, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 separate plants in that space between the walls. Is that actually what you're planning, or are you planning on putting more like a hedge there to cover up that wall? What's your landscape plan for that region?
We anticipate that growing in. That will also, if you look at the civil plan, we work with Glenn Dirth, civil engineer in San Rafael.
Oh, I know Glenn well.
Yeah, to utilize that area as a bioswale. We've worked with him. There's going to be 18 inches of soil above the class material that will act as that reservoir. And so we plan on using that space between the walls for that purpose. We feel confident that we can grow a hedge that will, please both from the pool side and from the street side. So we're confident in that.
Great. do you, who's screen sharing now? Oh, Matthew is. Matthew, could you also pull up for our benefit what the new proposed fence will look like, just so we're all looking at it during the presentation?
Thanks, Matthew.
So how tall is that and what materials are those? It looks like it's a 6-foot tall fence.
It is. It's going to act as pool safety. So we have the upper right detail that you see to the right of the light fixture there. Thank you. That is a black steel picket, vertical pickets, a 1/4 inch, and a top rail and a bottom rail. Just simple, that will provide that enclosure protection for the pool. And we have set that back off the street a bit so that we can have landscaping adjacent to the sidewalk and the street.
Do you, and sorry, do you have something in the plans that shows the sort of color and texture of that that's going to be used on that?
It's
This
just
is-
black painted steel. Yeah.
It's going to be a black painted steel, correct?
Okay.
We find that when you have, if you try too hard to design a fence, it's often the set fence that you see instead of the landscape, the plants that are planted around that. So this allows for air and light to get through this fencing, as opposed to a solid wood fence that doesn't allow visual, be able to see through, as well as doesn't allow that light and air movement to make the plants proliferate.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Does anyone else from the ADR have any questions or comments?
I have a couple questions, Mark.
Please.
So, and maybe it's somewhere and I just don't see it. I see that fence is placed back a little bit from the street or from whatever transition there is to the sidewalk there. Is there a planting plan for that? Now, one of the things that we would want, or I would want anyway, is for planting to obscure that from the public perspective. So where do I see on the plans what describe that?
It is not completely detailed. You can pull up the plan. There is some existing vegetation on the slope and at the street. Some of that will save, some we won't. The idea is that we will have a planting adjacent to the fencing.
On the
that will-
inside face, right? The laurel hedge is on the subject property side of the equation. Is that right?
Right, but as we've used many times before, this is a little different fence because it's a pool protection fence, but we often use that 2x4 woven wire black vinyl fencing, which the hedge will grow through, and for all intent and purposes, you will just see a hedge. The fence will disappear through that because the hedge will grow on both sides of it.
If that's true, maybe put it on the subject property side as a suggestion. I don't know. I'll get to see what we all think about that.
That's not a problem at all.
And sorry, Scott, just to clarify what you just said, you think that would not be a problem to put it on the inside of the hedge?
No problem.
All right, thank you. Sorry, go on, Stephen.
Those are all the questions that I have, I think, right now.
I have a quick question, Mark, for Scott. I'm just trying to clarify the trees that are proposed to be removed in this project. I think I see a few.
Yes.
Can you speak to specifically the one that is behind, I guess it would be on the east side of that arbor? It looks like a large oak, perhaps?
Yes, it is a large oak.
Personally.
The clients love that tree. Ken Julin came out to do his arborist report and found that there's rot in that tree. And his recommendation is that it gets removed. We and they, the clients, were upset, but it's a safety thing and he recommends, so we are going to remove it.
And then I see a few, are there a few near the proposed pool equipment area as well? Maybe just discuss.
There are, yeah, let me hit all of these. So there are two just the three that are near the pool equipment. The middle one is a privet, pretty much a weed. And then the two that flank it are plums that have been planted by some natural animal at some point in the past. Those are pretty weedy and those are going to be removed. There's also one that is at the south end of the pool. It is a magnolia that was badly pruned over the years and is an odd habit. So we're going to remove that as well. Near the oak that we addressed first, to the east of that is a bay tree that we're going to remove.
My eyes are bad. I'm sorry, how large is that bay? I just can't see it here.
It's 12 inch bay.
Thank you for the clarification on that.
Yeah.
I have a question as well. Could you just help us understand the process for locating the pool equipment in the front yard there?
It's a good question. We work with Matthew. He was very helpful. We had an alternative location that was actually east of the house. If you look east of the house, there's a location where the contours are, yeah, right there. We had considered putting it there, but that we were encroaching that far into this the rear setback with you know, a piece of equipment for the pool. He dissuaded us from that approach. We did discuss this with the neighbors, or actually Janelle and the owners, discuss this 193 Prospect, and they were pleased to have the conversation and did say that they were okay with the pool equipment in the front yard, or the front side yard right there, not in the setback, but in that we were going to hide it with plantings and obscure the sound with sound mitigation. Other locations for it would really put it either in the side or the rear setback. The other areas of the site, on the north side of the site, there is a drainage channel that sort of precludes any development there, but it's the grade descends steeply to that, and it's not beneficial to have pool equipment at a drastically different elevation than the pool. It just doesn't last as long. So that's where we came up with that location.
Okay, thank you.
I
Joey?
have one more, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you walk me through the decision-making that resulted in the trellis being in the backyard setback? How come the whole project was not pushed forward a little bit to get it out of the setback?
Good question. A couple of things to note on the Prospect side of things, the west side, there are two oaks. You probably saw those out there. Those are decent sized oaks. We wanted to keep the project away from that, both you know, for excavation as well as the shade that those give in the afternoon times when people are going to be wanting to use the pool. But more importantly, the kitchen area that's in the southeast corner of the house has windows that look out toward the side yard. And we wanted to have that pool in proximity when friends, family, and extended family are there for safety purposes. And so that established where that pool was going to be, and putting the trellis on the west side of the pool didn't seem to make sense to us. It breaks the view toward Baldy and the ridge line. If you were to sit under there, you'd be either looking at the view with your back to the pool, or you'd be looking at the pool with no view.
Oh, certainly. I just meant moving the entire arrangement a little bit forward, but I see you wanted it to line up with the kitchen. You're trying to have that alignment. I was curious, if you moved the entire thing forward, you'd be out of the setbacks.
There's an existing wall on the survey that is not far from the proposed wall. So we already had a couple of terraced areas, and we wanted to work with that natural grade of the landscape that's been there for I don't know how long. So that was another reason that we placed it where we did.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Any other ADR questions? Okay, I will open it up to the public. If there is anyone in the public not associated with this project who would like to comment or ask a question, now is the time. Okay, now I will bring it back to the ADR for recommendations. Joey, since you went last on the last project, you can go first on this project.
Oh, I fully support it. It's a great project. Have fun.
Thanks, Joey.
Okay,
I can go next.
thanks, Stephen.
I fully support it too. I think that that there is enough topography to the site and the mature trees and kind of the graciousness of the space that's given to the street perspective to warrant or justify putting the usable structure in the rear setback. You know, I think that I would recommend to the council that there's kind of a give and take on this lot that is worth it. You know, the lot can't take advantage of patios and pools and stuff like that as much as they might in the front portion, just because of the nature of these really pretty mature trees. And it seems that putting it back on the lot does not negatively affect the neighbor. If the neighbor objected strongly, then I think that all of us on the ADR might shrink back from that a little bit. But so I think that the trellis is great. And I think that the siting is really nice and natural and takes advantage of the topography in a really beautiful way. I would support it fully with a couple small conditions. One is that some planting be shown at the lower side of that 2 series of walls. You know, I think that the planting between, I don't know what they are. I have no idea what about plant species anyway, but hopefully that fills in that basin nicely and they drape over and do some cool things. But also I think we would wish for some planting on the front side or street side of that retaining wall to buffer that, because that's going to be 4 feet tall at spots, I think you said. And so obviously you'd want to cut down the mass of it or have it disappear with some cute stuff.
Great.
And so I think that planting is important. The steel fence, you know, we've seen this before and it's been successful. And on other projects, it's not quite, or it's taken a few years, you know, for that laurel to poke through the fence. And, you know, the tubular steel picket, it's just not a lovely thing. That's not a nice looking fence, really. It's okay. It's pretty benign, as you say, I agree, but it's not awesome. And so I don't know if the laurel should be placed close to it so that they really squish through, or you could put it on the other side. I wouldn't, you know, dictate that or pretend to know the best thing, but it would be nice if it weren't visible somehow. And then the pool equipment, you know, there's this kind of, from what I understand, like kind of a flat cedar fence, like a 6-foot fence kind of around it or something. And then this like row of hedges. I don't really know what the condition is of the rest of the planting in the area, and if it's all going to look naturalistic and totally, you know, grow in a way that's totally benign, or if it'll look like someone planted a row of boxwoods around a porta potty on a hillside. I just don't know I don't know, you know, so I feel spooky to me. And I feel like, gosh, could we put it in a concrete, you know, quasi bunker in the hill? Or I know that's more expensive than an above ground. So again, I wouldn't pretend to dictate the best solution, but it kind of looks nervous making, or makes me nervous.
Okay.
That's all I got, but I think it's lovely. I think you've done a great job.
Thanks, Stephen. Laura?
Sure. I'm also supportive of the project, and I agree that I have a little hesitation about that pool equipment and the hedging and how that will look, especially how visible it will be, one for the neighbor, but also from the street. And then similar thought is just the visibility of the pool from the street. I don't know if there's any, I didn't see if there was screening that would actually give privacy to them while they're at the pool. So that would be one thing I would think could be helpful, but other than that, I support the project.
Thanks, Laura. I'll go and I'll let you go last, Mark. I'm also supportive of the project. There are a couple things that did bother me. And one, I would completely agree with Stephen that I think the fence should be behind the hedge, because I don't think we want to see a 6-foot metal fence as the first thing into this beautiful property. And the second is just the pool equipment, which others have referenced too. And of course, this would be a discussion you'd have to have with the neighbors now behind you, but I would strongly recommend trying to situate that in the back of the house. If you're gonna have it in the front yard, I would really put it in a pretty solid concrete bunker. Just from experience, our pool equipment here is inside the pool house, like in the actual building, and we can still hear it from 50 feet away when it's going, even though it's inside the pool house. And it's the one thing that everybody says, oh, you won't really hear it because there are bushes around it, but it's pretty loud. And I'm not so worried about people hearing it on the street, although they do run 8 hours a day approximately. But people will hear it, and as the stewards are enjoying their pool, they'll hear it a lot more too when it's in the front yard, as opposed to being around behind the house in some kind of bunker, which I think would be preferable. And those are my two comments on the project, and I support it. I would like to see those two things changed.
Oh, I guess I'm last year then. Okay, so just on that same theme of the pool equipment, I think it's, given the topography of the site, I think there's an opportunity maybe to bury this in some way, shape, or form. You have almost, at a point, almost 6 feet of wall, in those retaining walls. We've seen that be fairly successful in other projects where people have, buried it in if they have a site that has this type of topography. So I think that would be preferable, not only for that. I know the neighbor is not saying anything right now, but it's actually relatively close to that home on that side. And I think that there's an opportunity to work with the landscape and that hillside to find a spot that's not in the setback, but is kind of buried into that hillside a little bit. The gazebo or the pergola, yeah, I think that's probably an appropriate spot. I can support it being in the rear yard setback. I would say that to be careful of the lighting. I recognize that there's some proposed lighting in that on the above structure. And I think because of the way the site from the street, you look up to that, you will see those on the underside. Maybe there's another strategy for lighting that pergola. Maybe they're post mounted, something along those lines that are shielded from the post from the streetscape. Because the way you look up at this thing, I think you'll see those. Just a thought. I agree on the fence. I'm curious if Patrick could just quickly bring up, or Matthew, bring up the site plan again. The streetscape is really quite beautiful in this street, and it is open. There's a very open nature to the site as you walk up it. Can you remind me if Matthew, you could trace, where does the fence, the fence goes to the Prospect Avenue side, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious if it's necessary to have that be the location of the fence. Is there an opportunity to put the fence inside of those two retaining walls in some way, shape, or form that provides you the necessary code compliance, but allows that front yard to continue to operate, quasi in the public realm? I've seen a lot of the projects that we've done over the past bunch of years. We've seen fences on the front yard, property line almost, and when that's not a continuous feeling along that streetscape, it feels very onerous. So I was curious to know if there's an opportunity to find that pool enclosure fencing somewhere in that same terraced wall that you have there. 6 feet is more than we typically like to see on a front fence anyway. I think we typically have them be 4 feet, but because this is a pool, you need it to be 6. And I just don't think that's really in keeping with the streetscape. So
When you
I would
have
love to see that pushback.
Mark-
Sorry, Stephen, I apologize.
No, I'm interrupting you. I apologize. But maybe someone knows the answer to this. When you have an automatic pool cover, do you also need a 6-foot fence? I thought that California was one or the other. Or maybe you know, Scott.
Well, they're requiring 2 levels of protection now. So it used to be up until a couple years ago, automatic cover was adequate. They're requiring 2 levels of protection, and I think the client was looking for that ease of mind as well. So you don't have any neighborhood kids coming in. So the idea is, yeah, to have that 2nd level of protection with a fence.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. I like the idea of security. I just think there might be an opportunity to move that closer to the pool and be, out of that. We get away from that idea of having the landscaping, trying to block the fence, and then you end up with sort of a wall, a wall of greenery or a wall of greenery plus fence right on that public streetway. So it's a question. It's obviously a little more challenging from a design perspective. Might save you some money on the length of fence. So looking for a plus on that side. But those are my main comments. The lighting on the pergola. I think there's an opportunity to do something with the pool equipment that is more of a bunker in those retaining wall area, which would mitigate the sound for everybody and the visible mass for everybody, and then the fence.
So Mark, are you talking about a fence that would basically go maybe along the lower retaining wall, which would be 4 feet anyway, so it would just be a couple feet taller than the retaining wall, and then coming into the house approximately where those steps are, something like that?
Yeah, that was my initial thought, Mark. I know that there are other considerations around the height, and that might be an overly simplistic approach, but it was the first thing I thought of. Yeah, something that's integrated in with that series of retaining walls, where the landscape, you want to landscape the walls, you want to landscape the fence, and you want to minimize the impact of that front yard. So all of those together seem like an opportunity maybe to pull that into that area. So yes, that is what I was thinking.
Am I able to talk at this stage of the process?
Please.
No.
Yes.
No, here we are. It also acts as a deer protection fence, and they're looking forward to a beautiful landscape. So that sloping ground it's going to be beautiful. You guys know what Janelle can do with planting. So I agree. I think pulling it back from the street will be beneficial, but bring it all the way to that retaining wall. They'll lose a lot of their property to a garden that they're looking forward to. We'll look at moving it back, but maybe not all the way up to those retaining walls.
What is the dimension from the sidewalk? There's a little row of stones, kind of a retaining little kind of thing. What's the dimension between that and the hedge there? Is that like?
Well, here you have, it's only about 4 feet, something like that. So it's not a huge amount of space. And, that fence, we will move to the east side of the hedge. And, that hedge, I could see it moving up a bit on the slope. It's when you move that fence higher up the slope, I think it will recede in the landscape, but it also will be taller in relationship to the road too. So we were looking at the balance between those two things.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have our recommendations. I would say, Matthew and Patrick, that first of all, everyone approves of the project. The majority would like to see the fence behind the hedge and maybe scooted back a little from the property line, but certainly having the fence behind the hedge. And the majority would also like to see the pool equipment relocated to either, underground in the retaining wall system and or behind the house, which is more problematic because it's in a setback. However, I think it'd be better for the homeowners and the neighbors and people walking by to not have it there. And I think pool equipment is always noisier than people envision, especially when you're sitting out on a nice Saturday afternoon and there's no other noise around except for that loud hum of your pool filter going.
Thank you. I believe we have those comments.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for your time. And thank you to the stewards and their design team. We will move on to the next order, which there is no conceptual advisory design review, staff communications. Before you two communicate, I forgot to say welcome back, Matthew. Nice to have you in our meeting again.
Thank you.
Do you have any communication to us other than the time and date of the next meeting?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. I will be out of town for that meeting in our post-vaccine world. Although I might be able to attend by Zoom, I might not. So Joey, you might end up running that one.
What's the date of that again?
June 15th. So you can mentally prepare for that. And that's it.
Oh, I was just gonna add, maybe I should wait until next meeting, but I'm gonna be out of town seeing my family in Michigan for the July meeting. So,
Good idea waiting till the COVID died down in Mexico, in Michigan, excuse me.
Mexico, I'd love to go to Mexico. That sounds fun.
Michigan's very similar, I've heard, this time of year.
Yeah, it'll be my first time traveling with 2 children, so I'm more nervous about that than anything.
It's actually easier now. It'll get really tough once they can actually move, when they're about 18 months old. That's when it's really tough.
True.
I think I hear coyotes and either my kids are screaming or I think there's coyotes.
They're excited for Michigan.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
And,
well,
Chair Kristen, if I could, I just had one piece of staff information just share with the group. Last Thursday, the council talked about writing a letter to the county board of supervisors about their preference for the Corte Madera Creek project. So you'll recall we were considering, there's a project to reduce the flood risk for Corte Madera Creek. And as part of the EIR, there were basically 2 options. One was to create a new creek access park where Frederick Allen Park is, you know, kind of next to the common, a little bit up the creek from the post office. And the other option was what's called Alternative 1, which is an alternative in the EIR, which is to keep all of the work to within the creek channel and not touch the park. And there was a questionnaire that was circulated around amongst the community, and the community was overwhelmingly in favor of not touching the park, keeping all the work to the channel. And so that's that's also the direction that the council went. So we'll be providing a letter to the Board of Supervisors that the town's preference would be not to change the park at all and to keep all of the flood reduction work occurring within the creek channel.
great.
Okay.
Maybe someday it will rain again in California and we're gonna
Yeah.
use that new channel.
Yeah, it seems a little silly talking about all this flood risk reduction when we're
I know.
talking about having to cover pools and things like that. So
Seriously.
Patrick, quick question on the flood in another location of town on the Winship Bridge project. Do you have, is the town moving forward with that? What status might that be in?
I don't know what the status is. I know that the funding for that project went into question. So Richard Simonich, our Director of Public Works, he's been dealing with that roller coaster for the last couple of years. So I suggest reaching out to him.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's not on your walking route, Mark, is it?
It can be. I pass Stephen's house and then walk down there.
Oh.
So I'm sure Stephen has an interest in where that one lands.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Good seeing you all again. I hope at some point later in the year, now that I assume we're all vaccinated, we can actually do this in person at some point.
Yeah, what are they saying about that? What's the plan?
We still don't have a plan for opening up town hall again, but the council, I think it's on one of the future agendas, is discussing. It'll probably always remain now a hybrid of remote and in person, just because of we've been getting great public participation by having people be able to access from their living room. So, but we don't have a plan in place yet, but it is on an upcoming agenda, I believe.
I'll say that the RPOA was looking to put their next month's meeting in person in the town council. Mayor Robbins was on the call. She said that was going to be fine, but suggested we continue remotely because it is so easy for everyone to participate. So I think that is opening back up for the opportunity to meet in person. At least it was for the RPOA board. But because we would have to be distanced, they decided it would still be easier to do via Zoom for the next meeting.
I assume by the fall, things will change as everyone starts going back to the office, et cetera.
Highway 101 certainly getting back to normal.
Yeah, the traffic is so bad. It's crazy. It's just back to maybe the way it was or worse, right?
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I suggest we adjourn the meeting, and I will see you in either 1 or 2 months.